Now, the temple was quite something in itself. 20 years before Jesus was born, King Herod began to rebuild it because it had gone into disrepair due to all the wars that had occurred in that area. And it was part of a simply magnificent and extravagant complex covering 35 acres. Huge. As you entered into the temple, the closer you got inside, the holier the temple became to the Jewish people. But King Herod enclosed the outer court with colonnades, and it was called the Court of the Gentiles. And that was a part of the temple that people that were not Jews could go and worship God. Now, you're in this chaos from the street, so one would assume that as you entered into the temple, there would have been a sacred quietness. But that's not what Jesus found. As he entered into the temple, up front and center are the priests, and they are selling sacrificial animals at an increased cost. These men had been given the job. The priest had been ordained to lead the people in righteousness. But instead, they were using the temple to make money. What happened would be that people traveling very far would have the inability, so to speak, to bring an animal. And so they planned on buying an animal when they got to Jerusalem. They just had to buy them at an inflated price. The people who brought their animals would have to be taken to the priest, and the priest would check that animal over. And if there was a blemish, that animal wouldn't do. Therefore, the priest would sell them one at an inflated price. The second group of people were the money changers. Now, a temple tax was expected annually, but the caveat here was that it had to be given in a specific coinage. Anyone coming into the temple would have to exchange their money for the correct coinage, and they were being charged an incredible exchange fee. So what Jesus walked into was a merchandise mart. It wasn't a place of worship. God's house was being mocked. And as I said, we're entering his ministry, and we're about to see Jesus become very public, because here he makes a whip out of cords, and all of a sudden he is whipping at the animals and whipping at the people trying to sell them, and they go running out. And then he turns to the money changers and he flips up their chairs, and money goes pouring everywhere. It is just crazy. And who is watching all of this? Well, first, those 5 disciples. Do you think they're wondering, what in the world? Because let's remember, they're early on in their relationship with him. Is this the same guy who just turned the water into wine very quietly? And then, secondly, you had the common people. Now, don't forget, we have people entering into the temple to make their sacrifice. What are they being greeted by? There are animals and people running out of the temple. Total chaos. What is going on? Oh, this guy has a whip in there and he's turning over tables. It's crazy. And then you had the priest. What right did this carpenter have to challenge what we did in the temple? It's so interesting to note that they obviously didn't hear his words when he said, "My Father's house." And then, even though they weren't there, the Romans would have become very, very aware of Jesus. It's interesting to note that those disciples that were with him would remember the Psalm 69:9, where it says, "Zeal for your house has consumed me." And zeal is a fervent jealousy. And what we see in Jesus as he is whipping that cord and turning over that table was God's jealous concern for his people.